Welcome, everyone. This election season, the North Pacific's Ministry of Radio is sponsoring a series of voice chat and text-based town halls for each candidate. We hope this event is informative, and we encourage you to participate by posting questions in the chat. Now let's get started. Welcome to the show, Praetor.
Thank you, Fiji, and thank you for hosting this event and for hosting all of these different town halls.
It's definitely going to be a long day. I appreciate your appreciation. Anyway, I want to dive right into things, just as I've done with all the other candidates. Let's get this started. First and foremost, can you give us a brief history of your time in the North Pacific, including each of the positions you've formerly held in our regional government?
Right, so I was founded in TNP back in early 2016. Then I applied for the executive staff, and I applied specifically to join, I believe it was the Ministry of Culture. My application wasn't responded to for quite some time. I even tried to contact the minister, but it went unanswered. As such, I took the next logical step of running for the delegacy. As you can imagine, I didn't get a single vote, not even my own, as I didn't believe I would do a good enough job compared to the other candidate. However, the other candidate had positions and applications open for those positions. So I applied for two of the positions, and I was given the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs. And at that time, I was quite new. I held that position for about 8 months. I also have served as an RMB Guardian, and the lead RMB Guardian, which is the predecessor to the Gameside Advocates, which I have also served as, and I have also served as a lead Gameside Advocate. And most recently and currently, I am currently serving as the Guild Master for the North Pacific Cards Guild. Get all of that?
Yeah, I did. I was going to interrupt a second ago and ask you to continue because I wasn't sure you were going to mention your Cards Guild leadership there, because I think that's pretty important. Could you discuss a little bit about why you decided to run for the delegacy this term?
Right. I believe that it is important that a delegate is able to bring imagination and creativity and be able to change the region and bring it to new heights and try out different stuff. We saw that McMacedonia tried out a few different things. For example, the themed Thursdays, which were quite well received and hopefully will be continued regardless of who is elected. We've also seen that there are some other initiatives, such as committees, which didn't succeed, and it's important though that nevertheless we still try these new initiatives. So I believe that I have a number of new ideas which will build our community and make it a better region, which is the reason that I'm running for delegate.
What do you think sets your campaign apart from others running for the same office?
I think I have some pretty big and significant ideas. The one that I'm most excited about is hosting and organizing social deduction games. I know that a number of individuals in the region would have previously played these sorts of games, and they tend to be quite popular both in other communities outside of nation states as well as in other regions. With the Cards Guild, we have seen that it has brought in new members, new citizens, new WAs. It's provided us as a method to recruit and to retain members, and I believe that social deduction games are something that in the future, after it is established, it could be added to the North Pacific Handbook, it could be added to our integration telegrams, and it would contribute to making our community bigger and providing more ways for people to get involved. And they're fun.
I definitely agree with your stance on bringing in social deduction games and that sort of thing. I definitely, ever since really joining the North Pacific, I have found our Out of Character Games and Arts forum that's just really filled primarily with spam topics to be somewhat disappointing. And that's actually led me to apply for citizenship in Wintreath, just because I know that their games community is really so prolific. So getting something like Werewolf going, or Secret Hitler, or something like that in our community on the game server is definitely something that I'm interested in. Could you, I know you just focused a little bit on culture and what sets your campaign apart from others, as I asked, but could you just run us through the core points of your campaign and the main points of interest for each ministry?
Right. So I just talked about the Ministry of Culture and the big initiatives that I'm going to be leading there. Also, underneath the Ministry of Culture, there's the Cards Guild, which of course I have been serving as, and I have been working well with a giant group of individuals such as Ren, DGS, 9003. So we'll be continuing to do more work, and there are still programs that we can release as we will maintain our leadership in as the foremost region in cards. In the Ministry of Home Affairs, I believe that we can do better in welcoming new players and integrating them. So I think that can take place in welcoming players when they post new threads. And I also believe that what we could do there is that we could have some sort of a suggestion box, as I've seen in the past that new nations may occasionally have ideas, but they're not necessarily sure about how to get them being implemented. In the Ministry of Defense, it is absolutely amazing what is being done. Previously compared to when I first joined, and I believe that there was only one general at that time. So now we have a number of generals, including a number of people who just recently got promoted. What I would like to do would be to expand further and increase the accessibility to joining the North Pacific Army. I want to recruit by having open houses where new players could just join the NPA for an operation or two without needing to necessarily join the forums, go through the admin check, so that they can test it out, and without the commitment that they may feel that joining the NPA formally does. So hopefully this would help recruit. As well, raid reports are a fun little way for us to advertise how the NPA is performing, which I would also like for the Ministry of Defense to work with communications. Now, in the Ministry of Communications, I believe that we should be refocusing on publishing the North Star to focusing on the Northern Lights, which is of much higher quality and is much more entertaining than I believe most of the North Star is. So I want to get out a lot more publications of the North Star, because I think that's what really drives eyeballs compared to the North Star.
You mean the Northern Lights? You want more publications of the Northern Lights?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Yeah, you spoke.
Yes, my bad. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, communications would be working with defense to advertise our army more often. In the Ministry of World Assembly Affairs, I believe that the Heroes of the North, which is working on commending or condemning Northerners in the Security Council, is the right step. And I would also like to work on creating a community of individuals in the General Assembly. We have a number of GA authors in our region. Tinsec recently joined. We have Moreover, Tombs, and Cosmo. And I would like for us to have more engagement on our forums, especially with individuals that are trying to write proposals. Because frequently people will post proposals, but they will have less feedback. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as I've previously served in this position, I know, and I currently serve as, I also serve as a senior diplomat. But anyways, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we need to be educating members of the ambassador corps about the ongoing affairs so that they have more of an idea of what's going on, and this would provide more of a pathway for us to identify individuals that are best suited for ranking up. For example, if there are weekly reports and there is a conflict between two regions or some sort of a dispute, we can see who engaged with that. And that was something that I actually previously did when I was minister. I also want to take another step in briefing the regional assembly privately about ongoing affairs, so that if something happens, they already know some sort of a background and they know what steps the government will be taking. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the Ministry of Radio, which is of course hosting this podcast. So I think we've seen tremendous growth, and I'd like for it to continue. I would like for us to restart posting recorded broadcasts onto the forum. That was actually typically how they made it to my attention, and I think it's good to have that permanent record instead of just being posted on Discord. And I would also like us to just organize radio to have some casual VCs instead of always focusing on broadcasts, but just to have casual VCs, because that could be a way to get people interested in radio.
Thank you for that thorough explanation of the main points of your campaign. I like that you kept it brief in order to make sure that we all understand what you're talking about.
So it stood I got a bit.
No, that's fine. With all goal-oriented campaigns, that's actually something that I really appreciate about your campaign. You basically give quantifiable metrics to base your success off of that provide some sort of level of accountability to your platform. But one thing that I've been asking other candidates is how you're going to improve regional recruitment into the executive staff. Because, as I've been saying, it takes a lot of effort from the entire community to make sure that these goals get achieved. And I just want to make sure that you have a thorough plan in place to making sure that happens when you're delegate, because otherwise I don't really see a chance for your goals to get implemented.
Right, so I actually didn't talk about my specific plans to make changes to the overall administration. One of the issues that I would focus on, and that I'm passionate about because this was how I first got involved, is ensuring that those speedy applications to the executive staff are getting accepted. I have seen that applications to the executive staff might take over a week before they get accepted. Now, it is key that when we are trying to recruit individuals to the region and integrate them, that they are getting processed quickly before they lose interest. Because if they lose interest, they just might never come back. So we need to get them on board early. And I think that ensuring that application to the executive staff is going to be one of the key ways to ensure that we have a sustainable government in the long term.
Another thing that I noticed that differentiates you from your other delegacy candidates is that you pretty firmly believe in the idea of having individuals apply for ministry roles or ministerships as opposed to just directly nominating them for the positions. Why do you feel that that is a superior method in recruiting new talent to ministry roles?
We have well over 200 citizens in the region, and we currently have 7 ministries. That's not keeping into account individuals who may not necessarily be involved in the executive. Now, while I would like to say that I know everybody in the region and that I know everybody in the government, unfortunately that is not the case. It is important that whoever is chosen for the position is the best. And I don't believe that there's any way to do that before having it open. I don't necessarily know how some other individuals would be selecting the ministers, both previously and in the future. Do delegates that are elected want people to come to them? Do they go to people? I know that in some cases, individuals have actually approached delegates to ask for positions. This would systematically disadvantage newer individuals because they would not necessarily have the experience or know that you typically need to approach somebody. Additionally, it would tend to favor incumbents, so somebody new who might want the position may not necessarily be considered because there's already somebody is. So I think the best way to get the best talent is by accepting applications for ministerial positions.
One thing that I'd like to note about that particular strategy is that in previous administrations, and this is something that I definitely faced when I was a delegate myself, is that because of the fact that we do have 7 ministries, and because there have been staff shortages, it's often difficult to find enough people to fill the right roles who are both competent and motivated in order to execute on campaign goals. And so the thing there being is, if you were to open up sort of this application-based method of recruiting ministers, would you go out and specifically encourage certain individuals to apply? Because if not, I feel that you might run the risk of getting too few applicants, or people who just don't have the necessary competence to achieve the lofty goals of your platform. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, and so I am planning to encourage both everybody through dispatches and telegrams, and of course the forum and R&B, that they should be applying. And I would also definitely be interested in saying that, hey, reaching out to individuals specifically and saying, you know what, I think you would be good potentially as a minister, you should apply. I can't promise that. And I've actually had people approach me and talk to me about the willingness to serve, and I'd say, well, I can't say anything. I'd have to receive an application. I'd have to see who other people that would be interested in serving in the position. But I don't believe that there would necessarily be people that would be hard to find to staff the position. And I don't necessarily believe that there's going to be a smaller pool of candidates compared to somebody who just doesn't open up applications. If anything, I believe that I would have a larger pool of applicants.
I definitely think that's fair, but just in the offhand that you actually end up in a position where, say, no one actually applies to be minister for a given position, what would you do in that circumstance?
Right. I do think that potentially could be a similar dilemma that another delegate could potentially be facing, even if they're just seeking out. Because I don't think an application is a heavy burden. Especially if you're going to be serving as a minister. I believe that that's something that should be feasible. In that case, I believe I would have to more intensely look at recruiting for that ministry. It could be potentially possible that I try to potentially find someone who is more experienced but not necessarily have the interest to potentially switch over to that ministry, even temporarily, and say, hey, you know what, there's just not enough individuals that are going to be staffing this ministry. We need somebody who can try and get it running and get more individuals so that hopefully in the future we can have a larger pool of qualified individuals.
Can you discuss your leadership style a bit? In other words, to what extent would you direct activity within each ministry if they're not performing up to your standards?
Right. I think my preferred style of leadership is that if there's something new, I think it's best for myself to get involved in it, especially if it is an idea that I have. If it's something that's been going on for a while, whether that's publishing IFVs, whether that's running military operations, if the region is already doing something, I don't really need to be involved with it if I'm not looking to change something. However, I would be more involved with the particular aspects that I want to improve on, such as the development of social deduction games or weekly briefings to both the ambassador of courts and to the regional assemblies.
So I know you've already talked about the core points of your campaign, but this is a question that I've asked all the other delegate candidates as well, and that is specifically focusing on each of our regional communities. What will your administration do to improve the life of the NPA or our role players or our RMBers or the people who serve the low down positions in our executive staff?
Right, so I'll start with the first one that you listed, the roleplay community. Now, the roleplay community has an interesting relationship as it is underneath the administration and thus the roleplay moderators. So the executive government doesn't oversee it. Now, what I do is that I would be responsible for the promotion of roleplay, and I believe that one of the best ways that we could further promote our roleplay would be through dispatches. We currently promote the Ward Assembly Development Program, as well as other communities like cards through dispatches. I believe that using dispatches, it would have better visibility. So that would be something that I'd be interested in working with the roleplay community to promote the roleplay community more. In terms of the NPA, I have talked about how an open house, I think that could further create a larger military, so I think that would definitely benefit them. In terms of the community of cards, I would be looking at, we'll have more programs, continuing to roll them out, that will be to help new players, that will be getting more players involved in helping to create the collection that they want for cards. In terms of the executive staff, especially newer players, that would be focused on accepting executive staff applications quickly. And I also believe that having a top-down approach of saying that I want to have the best talent possible through accepting applications, I also believe that that's going to have trickle-down effects, and that we will also be looking at trying to really promote individuals that are staff to deputy ministers based on their performance.
For those individuals who haven't really read through your campaign, do you have any specific ideas on different events that could be held during the next term in office?
Right. So I think that one of the best ways to improve the North Pacific is not by events, but by making contributions that are going to be able to last more than just a few days or a couple of weeks. So whether it is, for example, in the past, we have the Ward Assembly Development Program, whether it's Mad Jacks, fostering of the roleplay community, whether it is the Cards Guild, if we can build something that is going to sustain and last longer than just my term, that's what I want to do, and that should be the focus, because it's going to give us better benefits. So in particularly, as I mentioned, both working on the social deduction games. I'm always tempted to say social distancing.
I know, it's so tempting.
And the also looking on fostering a GA community within the region. I think that these are going to have better returns. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to have events. And I have mentioned that I would be interested in continuing the theme Thursdays, as well as potentially looking at getting a new regional flag.
All right. So at this point in the interview, I'm going to start turning over to more audience-submitted questions. Specifically regarding your quick point on the regional flag, I know that there's already been a discussion in the Regional Assembly about replacing our regional flag. What would you do to sort of revitalize that discussion? And do you have any designs in mind?
Right, so I am a fan of, I'll answer your questions backwards. I do like the flags that have been proposed by, I believe, a number of individuals. I believe there was Hydania, there was also, I believe, Silly String proposed very similar flags, so I do like that general theme. In terms of having the ideas, it was mentioned in the past that probably the best way to go about it would be to having an event where individuals could submit what they think the flag of TNP should look like. And then we would, of course, we're a democracy, have an election to figure out which flag the community wants, which would then, of course, have to be proposed to the Regional Assembly to be legally ratified.
If the public turns out to be really against that particular idea, sort of, would you allow for individuals to decide within the Regional Assembly to keep the current flag if that was something that they wanted to do?
I think based on previous discussion in the Regional Assembly that there is definitely a willingness to change the regional flag, and if individuals aren't interested, well, you know, we're a democracy. We're going to follow the will of the majority, and that would be fine.
Another point to TNP traditions, Vivanco here is asking what your stance is with the Agora Act.
Well, what's done is done. I do have some concerns about the implementation, and I do believe that in the future we're going to run into some problems potentially. But, you know, we'll just have to deal with those problems whenever they happen. Yeah.
Vivanco also asks what makes you think he might be a suitable minister, considering his whole Attorney General fiasco.
Well, I reject that it was a fiasco, his term as Attorney General, first off. While I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything that he did, I don't think it was that problematic. Secondly, the position of Attorney General is different from the position of a minister. I've seen that he's been active in the Ministry of Radio, which is important. He's also been active in Voices, and I think that he's been active in being able to get things done. So in that sense, I do believe that he would potentially have the position to serve as minister.
As Boromir asks, given that resolution writing is individual work as opposed to military or even newspapers in their own way, how will you encourage authors to write in the heroes of the North? How will it be an advantage to work in a group?
Right. I think that the current process has not been ideal, which is fine to just test it out. But I do think that it needs to be refined, and I mentioned potentially having someone individually in charge. We do have a number of successful Security Council authors. 9003 is currently at vote, his resolution, which I co-authored. Boromir and Moreover have also authored resolutions. So I think actually having somebody specifically in charge of a resolution would be better to make sure that it's being brought forward.
Moreover asks, what are your thoughts on delegate bumping in order to prevent a proposal from getting to vote?
Well, tactically it is quite sound. I'm going to say that there are two different ways that we can stop a proposal from getting to vote. Both we can send unapproval campaigns, which we do have a specific service for, and then we can also do this aforementioned delegate bumping. Now, I am in favor of it. However, something that I have not seen mentioned in discussion is that the administrators of nation states would potentially be looking at changing this if it turns out to be problematic. So we can't just go out and start bumping all of the resolutions that we don't like. I believe that those resolutions that we should be bumping should be undeniably fascist supporting resolutions. And then secondly, we should also be looking at retaliation. For example, in the cases of when we saw most recently, where I believe it was Right to Life went around trying to remove delegates from the proposal of Imperium Anglorum. And I would note that the admins have commented that if it got too abused, that they would be looking at changing it. However, as long as it doesn't become too problematic, they enjoy it. So there needs to be a bit of a balance. I'm just reading the comments in the Agora text right now.
Do you think that balance needs to be predicated on our WA ministry first arguing for and creating better discussion points on proposals? So what I'm essentially asking is, how much do you think the NPA should raid to bump these proposals if the WA ministry hasn't really done its due diligence in convincing the public around nation states as a whole on a given issue?
I don't believe that necessarily has to do with convincing the public to vote a certain way. There are certain resolutions which can be damaging to even reach to vote. So regardless, where we know that this resolution will go to vote and it will fail, we just need to prevent it from getting to vote at all. In that case, it is appropriate for delegate bumping to occur, just because we want to prevent this resolution from getting to vote.
Namaria asks, how would you handle a situation where a ministry suffers from understaffing? Not because there are not a lot of active players in the ministry, but rather because there's just a small group of players willing to work in the ministry on a regular basis. In other words, how would you motivate newcomers to a ministry to participate more actively?
Right. So I think that recruitment to a ministry can happen based on advertisement of that ministry. I know that previously, when I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, there was a joke going around that I would always quickly try to get new players to join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and that they should run for me. So I think that a minister just being extremely proactive and visible, saying like, hey, welcome to nation states whenever somebody joins the Discord server, and saying, hey, you should totally join my ministry. So I think being proactive in that front and being extremely visible will help to get newer players to join. Additionally, I think that there could potentially be issues in that potentially maybe the pool of work isn't diverse enough. So I think that potentially even having other types of work for players to do can help get them into the ministry, and then you could potentially try and get them over to do other types of work.
One thing I noticed you mentioned earlier was the idea of potentially bringing back McMasterdonia's sort of internal and external affairs committee system. Given that particular idea didn't seem to work in its previous form, what innovations would you bring to that system in order to make it work during your term, if that's in fact something that you're interested in doing?
My point was that sometimes that you try innovations like McMacedonia did, but if they don't work, you shouldn't keep working on them, and that sometimes you just need to let them go.
Right, thanks for that clarification. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, so I wanted to make sure that you were able to say that.
Of course.
Are there any changes that you would make to the executive in order to sort of bring your vision for TNP into the future from McMasterdonia's delegacy?
I do believe that I've made a number of plan changes, from wanting to accept applications for ministers to enforcing executive staff applications getting accepted early. Then I've elaborated on my platform a number of changes that I would like to make. I think McMacedonia has done a great job, and I want to build on that foundation, and I believe I have a plan that would do that.
I guess one criticism that I would bring up about McMasterdonia's term in office is that various members of the roleplay community have expressed that the government doesn't really do enough for role players, whether that be for RPR or other ways of promoting that community. If elected, how would you address their concerns?
I think I would need to engage directly with these concerned individuals. I don't necessarily know if they are newer to the region or older. The RP community isn't overseen by the executive government, so it's not my job. If there's going to be a change in that, there's going to need to be a ton of communication, and it has been clearly communicated previously that the RPers don't want the government going in to impose on them. However, I am definitely willing to work with the RP community in whatever way possible to help promote them. I did mention my idea for dispatches, and I would definitely be willing to engage with them to help promote them in any other ways that they would see fit to suggest.
Thanks for that answer. Will your administration have a chief of staff? And if so, what role would they serve?
I do believe that any position if they're going to be serving, it needs to be clearly communicated both before or when they get appointed, as well as ongoingly, what they are doing in the ministry. I believe that in the past, the chiefs of staff have had a rather opaque role, so I'm not necessarily convinced that I would be keeping one, and I actually don't think that I would plan to have one.
given that many of the other delegacy candidates believe that you have a really strong background in home affairs, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more in detail about what you think home affairs can do to bring in new blood to each of our executive staffing ministries.
Right. So I definitely appreciate the compliment, especially as I've never even served as a deputy minister of home affairs. I think I've mentioned before that executive staff applications need to be accepted quickly. It's quite potentially that if there wasn't my position, if I didn't run for delegate, that I might have just completely lost interest because my executive staff application just was there for a number of days and no response at all. So accepting executive staff applications will help to integrate people quite quickly. As well, I've also mentioned that trying to engage with threads made in the docs. I do try to engage with all of them, but typically I'll find that when somebody makes an introduction thread, that there might just be a post or two welcoming. I think that we could definitely work on having more people welcoming more members of the community.
Do you believe that the lists that Home Affairs sends have evidence that suggests that they are effective? Or do you believe that there are alternative ways in which Home Affairs can have an impact in bringing people from Gameside to the offsite forums?
Well, I consider that there's a limited methods that we have to recruit and contact a nation. You can get them a notice, such as in dispatches. You can mention them in dispatches. You can send them a telegram. You can advertise on the OMB. There's a limited avenue of ways to actually contact a nation that's on purely Gameside. And I believe that currently Home Affairs does a good job of using all of the possible avenues to contact nations.
All right, so at this point, I'm starting to run out of community-suggested questions. So while I hate to do this, I will turn over to some of the more joke questions. So feel free to answer them however you like. If anyone else has any comments or questions about Praetor's campaign, feel free to post them in the Agora text, and I'll try to make sure they get incorporated into the interview. So 9003 and later Rakota ask, who is your favorite deputy guildmaster, ... and why is it DGES?
I won't say I have a favorite. I think that each of my deputies brings something different to the table. DGS does a fantastic job at writing. He puts out a lot of quantity of writing. You guys will see that in the guide and also elsewhere. 9003, he gets involved in other aspects of the community. I like to see that he's doing other work, and it's great to see that cards players are getting involved in different aspects outside of just NS. I'm also going to put a shout out to Rom. Rom does a really great job because he does he helps out a lot with, he gives me cards sometimes, which is nice, and he also donates cards for card pull events. So those are definitely appreciated because we need cards for card pull events. And I'm also going to mention that I do love Valentine's Red because his tour for cards is my favorite one.
Bob has also asked this question twice, so despite it being a joke question, I feel the need to post it for you. Would you be willing to banject BMW server?
I believe BMW is CTE'd, is he not? Or has he recently returned?
I think he still is, but let's just say he was active again.
If he's active again, I would follow the law and not banject him unless he was breaking the law. Good
answer. Alright, Pridania here is wondering what your favorite roleplay from the past year is.
I'm gonna have to do a bit of favoritism here, and I am going to support Song of Heroes, which is one that I previously participated in, although I did lose interest in it. So no longer participate in it. But that's one that I've enjoyed.
Speaking specifically about your role in the Cards Guild, do you have any ideas for other ways that cards can be used to supplement TNP programs?
Right. So we do have a number of them. I am quite aware that every single feeder region has expressed interest in cards, looked at cards. I know that other regions are also looking at our cards guild, so I'm not going to decline to go into specific details because I believe that given that cards is such a new thing, it's important that we maintain a competitive advantage. We keep seeing that card players are going to be coming to this region simply because of all of the great stuff that we're doing. You will also see that there will be some more card stuff coming out regardless of whatever happens. No matter who's going to be elected, there's still going to be some more development with cards coming out, and some will be coming out quite soon, hopefully.
Do you think 9003 is ever going to win Soups?
Probably not, but I'm going to be I'm extremely thankful that he decided to move his name in, because typing that name in for the paperwork took a lot of time.
Boromir is also asking a joke question here. Will Bob have a government position if you were delegate?
I'm not categorically opposed to such, but I'll need to see an application from him.
Right. Well, we have exhausted the entire supply of publicly submitted questions. And I feel like I've gone through all of the last ones that I had as well. Praetor, do you have any final statement that you'd like to add, or questions that you thought would be asked that haven't been asked?
I would like to encourage everyone who is either listening currently or will be listening in the future after this is published to make sure to read through all of the campaigns, make sure you ask any questions. Questions are always welcome, and then just make an informed decision.
All right, well, thank you to everyone who has participated in this town hall session. Thank you for posting questions. I know we ran out a little bit early, but I think that's just due to the fact that, Praetor, you've been very good about giving your answers in a really clear, succinct way. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being willing to speak on such short notice.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Have a nice day.
I will.